Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020, and California is now sending a new senator to represent the state of California through the 2022 ending term of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris' seat. Alex Padilla, the Secretary of State from California, will now go on to be the first Hispanic California senator in California history for a state that is a plurality, majority minority. It is very interesting to me that they have never had a Hispanic senator in the entire history of the entire state. But now it is going to happen. Alex Padilla will go on to be the next senator from the state of California, and he will serve through 2022. It was announced today that Governor Gavin Newsom, I'm sure you've heard his name due to his COVID-19 response, he was first elected back in 2018, but he has appointed Alex Padilla to replace Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And it's very fascinating that he is now going to be the first Latino Hispanic senator from the state of California. It's a very monumental step for Hispanic representation in the state of California and Hispanic representation across the entire country. With Kamala Harris leaving the Senate, the entirety of the U.S. Senate will now have 0 black women moving past 2021. 0. And I think that's something that isn't exactly a good thing for America. Every single demographic group needs representation. They desperately need representation because when there is no representation, well, generally the interests aren't exactly going to be taking into account different groups across the country. But now that we see Alex Padilla nominated, this was a Senate seat that was definitely being discussed very intently. Gavin Newsom has announced that the 32nd Secretary of State from California will be the next United States Senator from the state of California, and he will be the first Latino senator in California history. Now, there's always the possibility that another Senate vacancy opens up, but this was the one to look at. And actually, Kamala Harris has had a very quick rise to political fortune. 10 years ago, you probably would not have known who she was. She was pretty much just someone who was a prosecutor. That's all she was really known for back then. And even up until 2016, she had served as Attorney General, but she wasn't exactly this nationally recognized figure. You wouldn't have thought of her as a potential VP running mate for Secretary Clinton back in 2016. In fact, Kamala Harris didn't even serve an entire full term. She only began serving in the United States Senate in 2016. And she didn't face off against a Republican. She faced off against a Democrat. Kamala Harris was definitely one of the more well-known names in California, but she wasn't this nationally recognized figure until after she was elected. She was one of the very few, I believe actually, she was one of the first black women to represent the state of California. And when you look at Kamala Harris's history, there's a lot of firsts. There's a lot of firsts in there. And the vice presidency is probably not going to be her stopping point. But when we're looking at her 2016 campaign performance, I also want to bring up the fact that we could possibly see Alex Padilla win in 2022. I think he could go on to win a full term. Now, his Senate seat is going to be hotly contested. It's not going to be between a Republican, though. It'll probably end up being between 2 Democrats. And if you're wondering how this happens, it's because California has a jungle primary season. Before the election actually occurs, all of the candidates, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Green Party nominees, Libertarian, whatever, they all go onto the same ballot. And those who end up in the top two will go on to face off against each other on the general election day. So Kamala Harris and Loretta Sanchez were the top 2. We can actually go ahead and take a look at the jungle primary results just to see what actually happened. The Republican Party only got 7.8% in its most candidate. It ended up being between Kamala Harris and Loretta Sanchez. And we knew that was generally how it was going to go. It was not going to be between a Republican or a Democrat. And when you look at the finalized results, it ended up being between 2 Democrats. So it was obviously a safe Democratic seat. It actually, surprisingly, in 2010, props to Carly Fiorina for making this race exceptionally close, only 10 points in California. Voted for Obama by 30%, only 10 points. I think that's very interesting. But 2016 rolls around, absolutely not this remotely competitive state whatsoever. California on the presidential level now, still plus 30 for Joe Biden. Well, plus 29.2%, but still very, very large. Looking at Joe Biden's victory here, I can't imagine that Alex Padilla would face any type of Republican opposition, maybe Democratic opposition. It's going to be a targeted race, though. I can guarantee that. We already see a number of potential contenders, but this is big for Hispanics in the state of California. This is big for those non-white Hispanic voters, because representation means everything. Representation means everything in our country, because when you're looking at the systemic bias from a lot of these politicians grew up in time periods where not everyone was treated equal. It is very important that representation happens, that representation actually is there in the United States Senate, in the United States House of Representatives, and in, of course, the presidency. So looking at the overall demographic or the racial breakdown from the state of California, you will see that now, following the 2010 census, and it's likely to be higher, non-Hispanic white voters are in the plurality. They make up 40.1% of the state of California. That is going to change after we conclude this 2020 census. Hispanic voters of any race make up 37.6%. So they are in a very close second. The next is down to Asians with 13% racial breakdown, and the non-Hispanic black citizens. I'm so used to saying voters at the end of a racial breakdown, but 6.2%, and then American Indians and Alaska Natives, 1%. So when you're looking at the racial composition, the Hispanic population has continued to grow from 1960 onward. California started out being very high in terms of its non-Hispanic white population, 92%. Went up down to 89% in 1970. Went down to 66.6% in 1980. Went down to 57.2% in 1990, 46.7% in 2000, 40.1% in 2010. It's going to go down to a point where now Hispanic voters are going to be the plurality, possibly even the majority in the state of California. It's such a populous state, very, very large in terms of its population. The 2019 estimate says that there are roughly 39 million people in the state of California alone. That is huge. California has an extremely large population, and a lot of it, 14 million Hispanic citizens in the state of California. This is the state with the largest Latino/Hispanic population in the entire country, the largest. And the fact that they are just now getting their first Latino senator is important to note. That's newsworthy. That's breaking news from the state of California. There was a lot of weight on Gavin Newsom's shoulder to ensure that there would be representation once the only black lady in the Senate leaves the Senate to serve in the White House. Gavin Newsom had to ensure that there would be representation of some kind in the state of California. And he did it. And Kamala Harris did not necessarily face that much in terms of her in terms of opponents back in 2016. We could see Alex Padilla face a lot more opponents. Look at the potential. We see a lot of well-known people across the state. We see potential state senators. We see representatives that are very well-known. Eric Garcetti, Karen Bass. We see a lot of people that are well-known, nationwide, well-known across the state of California. Katie Porter, Adam Schiff. A lot of these people are well-known names, and they could see this as an opportunity. It's going to be technically an open seat. There will be an incumbent, but there won't be an elected incumbent, so Kamala Harris will be that incumbent that's outgoing. But when you're looking at the 2022 Senate race, this could be a time where the Democratic Party will actually see somewhat of a bloodbath of a lot of these candidates that are going to look at this as an opportunity to run for Senate. And a lot of them will take it. Looking at that potential list, I wouldn't be surprised if half of that list actually decided to run. And on that list is Alex Padilla, the U.S. Senator designate, which essentially just means that he's senator-elect but wasn't elected. So right before he gets sworn in, he will be sworn in, and he will serve for 2 years. And he could end up serving for an additional 6 if he's elected in 2022. But the Republican Party's not so stellar performance in California has to be pointed out as well, because there will not be a Republican candidate against Alex Padilla. If that happens, well, they're going to get 30% of the vote. We're not going to see any type of real Republican opposition to this Senate race because it's still California. Every right-wing media source, every right-wing surrogate loves to mention California as the land of liberals. Believe it or not, there's never been a Democratic president from the state of California. The Republicans have had more presidents from California than Democrats. Obviously, it doesn't mean much when the Democrats have 0, but it's just something interesting. But California, characterized, stereotyped as a very liberal state, a very, very liberal state, and it is. And it's absolutely going to be in 2022. But the main thing about this is not that Padilla is going to face opposition in 2022 to his not necessarily re-election, to his first term election, but the fact that he was nominated by Gavin Newsom is historic. It's historic for all of the 14 to 15 million Hispanic citizens in the state of California. It's historic that he is going to be representing a very significant portion of the entire American population that is consistently underrepresented at every step. Every minority group is. Every minority group is. When you look at the racial breakdown of the House of Representatives and of the Senate versus the racial breakdown of the country, it's mismatched. It is mismatched, absolutely. And when you're looking at even Senate positions, the fact that it's now 2020 and California is just now getting its first Hispanic senator for a state that's had tens of millions of Hispanic, or at least a handful of millions, now up to 14 million Hispanic citizens, you do have to question, why did that not happen before? But you also have to realize that this is good. This is good news for a very significant portion of the American population. Even California Hispanics on their own make up 14 million citizens. That's more than the majority of states. So when you're looking at Gavin Newsom's appointment, I think many people of all political columns should be celebrating that appointment, because I think that's something that's good for America. I think representation truly matters, and this is adding to it. And I do applaud Gavin Newsom for this move, because he was not going to nominate anyone that shouldn't be in this position, and I think Alex Padilla is a very good pick for the state of California to serve through 2022. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.